It is wonderful to see you. This is one of those, I'm just going to spotlight myself so that you can see what I'm doing. This is one of those senses that maybe we don't explore that much because it's a little tricky, because a lot of times we go outdoors and we don't want to taste random things, and that's a good thing. We're designed as humans to be cautious of what we eat because that can be not so good sometimes. But when we do know what we're eating, perhaps it's something we've planted in our own vegetable garden, perhaps it's edible, perhaps we're foraging and it's something we know to be edible, that can be a really wonderful, joyful thing to experience. And putting that down in our nature journals is joyful as well. So I am going to first show you a little slideshow of things that I've been thinking about in relation to edibles and nature journaling. And then we're going to nature journal some flavors together. I've got an apple and an orange, and this came to me because I was thinking it's really difficult to nature journal flavors. And even to, like, we can taste the flavor, but specifically knowing how to describe it. I mean, if you gave this to me and I tasted it, I would know what it was. If you gave this to me and I had my eyes closed and I tasted it, I know what it was. But how do I describe that in a nature journal? How do I describe that in words or pictures? And so it came to me that an apple and an orange, often people say it's as different as comparing apples with oranges. And so I thought that that could be a fun comparison to do, because comparison is really fun in our nature journals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my slideshow with you, and we're going to take a look at this first, and then we're going to nature journal together. So I called this slideshow Flavors of Nature from Garden to Journal, because I think connecting with gardens is such an amazing thing to do. Gardening and nature journaling are a perfect match. If you're a gardener, as is Karina and myself, and I'm sure a lot of you, you'll know that gardening is something that is unfolding, constantly changing. And these changes are so good to put down in our journals. Traditionally, a lot of gardeners use a journal to take down notes about what they plant and what's working well, what's not working well, what pests have arrived at what time, that sort of thing. And extending that into a nature journal is a wonderful thing to do, because the other languages that we have for describing things, including pictures, numbers, and words, can just make that whole documentation process really rich. I wanted to share this with you because I'm all about joy and finding places of joy. This was a community event that I did just a couple of weekends ago. You can see on the left-hand side, we had, so this was for my hometown, which is Samford. This was Samford Edible Garden Trail. And during the Edible Garden Trail, they open up a bunch of gardens around the village, and people come and tour the gardens and see what's happening in other people's edible gardens. And I did a 2 full-day workshop with the community. I had all this garden produce and I had all these art supplies, and we put it together. And on the right-hand side, you can see what became this collaborative community mural all about edibles. And I know that nature journaling edibles isn't the same as nature journaling flavor, but I just want to show you how we can incorporate our foods into our nature journals. And this is one way that we did it as a community. This was another thing we did on the same weekend. We made these teeny tiny little seed packets and did a nature journal, a little picture and a label of the seeds. And then we had, you can see at the top right on the second photo, there's a little, we had a scoop, and you could scoop some seeds into the packet and take it home with you. So this was one way of connecting community and edibles and nature journaling, and it was so, so wonderful. This is another way that my community connects with each other and with food, is something called the Sanford Edible Exchange. And it's actually just this little box on the side of the road where people bring their harvest and swap it for other people's harvest. And when I went there the first time, I was so blown away by this feeling of community and just energy and edibles, and it was so amazing. I just took these things home and experienced them with my senses. You can see I'm touching and smelling and tasting everything, and for me, these things are mixed. You know, the joy of the community and the sharing and the harvest made me want to paint and draw. And this is another one I did from another visit to the Edible Exchange. I just had, so you can see I dropped off an armful of oranges. It was around this same time we've got oranges growing on our tree. And then I picked up some sweet potato runners and some custard apple and lemons. And again, I came home with this armful of produce, and I just wanted to turn that into a nature journal page. So we can let edibles be part of the things that inspire us. Now, this was done a very long time ago, April 2020, it was during lockdown. And John Muir-Laws decided to encourage people, if they couldn't go out, to nature journal what was in the refrigerator. And for me, this page was just so full of fascination and wonder. And I actually now use this page as a teaching aid in my workshops because it makes me smile. And I say to people, you know, in nature journaling, we're all about turning on curiosity. And if you can get curious about a rotting mung bean sprout or a very old half a lemon, then you're in, you know, you're in the mindset. And so you can spend, you know, 2 hours looking at broccoli and cauliflower under a microscope. These things can be part of your nature journaling. And I just wanted to show that to you because, you know, we think of nature as sometimes out there, and maybe that the food we eat is because we're disconnected from the process of growing food. Some of us are, a lot of us are. We can forget that actually that is nature. The carrot, the rotting mung bean sprout in the bottom of your fridge, that's nature. And so, yeah, I invite you to think about that, to see this connection between what we eat and the nature journal page. Now, this one was done, and Karina's going to put a link in the chat. So there's an amazing nature journaler called Ivea Moore, and she decided to do this series of workshops on YouTube, and they're still available on YouTube. They're amazing. So the series is called Plant Families in Our Foods, and the whole series is going through one by one families that are part of our everyday lives because we eat them in all of our meals. And Ivea takes us through the different families, how to recognize them, what foods are in each family. And it's just a really great way to get to know our foods and the families that make up those foods. So I wanted to let you know about that so you could follow up if that's interesting to you. Now, let's talk about a few things that you can do with gardens and nature journals. This is an edible flower, a nasturtium flower, but I'm showing you this because one wonderful thing that we can do is track change over time with edibles and garden plants. And this is one flower. So this is, you can see that I've got dates and times on here. And the very first one, when I decided to do it, was late afternoon on the 16th of November. The next one is the next day in the morning. And you can see how different it is. It's starting to open. And then the next one after that is the same day, but in the late afternoon. And this flower is coming open. And I kid you not, I was wildly in love with this flower by the end of this process. And even my son went, so it was still grown, it was in the ground, and I was visiting it, and I would pull down the stem a little bit, but without disturbing it too much. And my son went outside and I was panicking, like I thought he was going to somehow snip or damage the flower. And this flower was my friend by the time, by the time I'd done 2 of these sketches, it was already my friend. And so, but you don't have to do this with the flower. You can do it with I've started doing the same thing actually with a snow pea shoot. And so journaling our edibles as they're growing in the garden, as they're changing over time, is a wonderful way to connect with the foods and connect with that process, connect with growth and change. And in this case, death, because the flower shriveled, you can see the changes in the color. So this is one great way we can connect with the flowers and the fruits and the vegetables in our garden. Another way that we can connect with our flavors and our foods and drinks is to make an illustrated recipe. And I found this in a journal that I did very, very long time ago, maybe 10 years ago. And it's a simple one, and it's just the recipe for making chai, because this was my favorite drink at the time. And journaling in this way about something, it doesn't have to be a drink, it could be anything, but really simply making an illustrated recipe can connect us with our foods. Now, this is one that I did a long time ago. And in fact, I don't think this fig is edible and we didn't eat it, but you could do it with, it inspired me. I was thinking of if you did it with a cherry tomato, for example, you could track the changes in growth and ripening and then decay. And taste could be one of those steps. You can see that my son and I lined them all up in this gradient, and we noticed that the gradient was consistent across color, ripeness, smell, hardness to squishiness, and smooth to wrinkly. But you could do this in a gradient of taste, and you could taste how tart or how becoming sweet, because sweetness is something that nature gives us as a beautiful reward for taking away the fruits and dispersing the seeds. And you could make a gradient of sweetness with different colors and ripenesses of cherry tomatoes, for example. And I wanted to mention foraging and edible weeds, because edible weeds are such an amazing way to connect with nature and taste. And so eating edibles, I don't want to encourage you to go out and just eat weeds, because you need to know exactly what you're eating. But if you have, if you have a knowledgeable source who knows exactly how to advise you what to eat, then you can take that knowledge and find weeds around your area that can be eaten. I advise you to be conscious and careful about sprays, because councils can spray weeds on road verges and stuff like that. But if you know that it's pure and it's definitely edible, foraging for weeds can be so much fun. And I remember my son is a little bit vegetable resistant. But we went on a weed walk with someone who's an expert in that, and she showed us purslane for the first time, and he loved it. And there was something a little illicit or like cheeky in his mind about eating weeds, and so he was all for it, and he just was eating purslane like he wouldn't stop. It was wonderful. So edible weeds can be a wonderful thing to incorporate into your journaling practice. And as we know, nature journaling is all about learning. And so when you want to learn a new skill, like identification of edible plants, nature journaling can be a wonderful way to do that learning. And so when you pay close attention to the leaf structure, to the flower color, to the layout of all the parts of the plant, and you put them down in your journal, then you're also learning at the same time how to identify safely edible weeds. And the last thing I wanted to say is that flavor is really deeply connected with culture and heritage. And so whatever your background is, whatever your family lineage, it's going to influence and inform the flavors that you enjoy, the flavors that you have memory of, the flavors that you were raised with. And so I invite you to think about that, think about the flavors that are a part of your culture and journal about them in whatever way feels good and interesting to you as a way to connect with your own culture and heritage. So with all that said, I want to do some journaling together. I hope you have rushed out and got yourself something that's edible. I've got an apple and an orange. And as I said before, these two things are famous for being different. So we're going to give it a go of nature journaling these two very different things and describing what that's like. I was thinking about flavor today because it's such an elusive thing. We know what it is, and yet it's really hard to talk about. It's really hard to describe. There's some words that people sort of bring out when they're describing what you can taste with your taste buds, and people say that there's just 4 or 5 flavors, authentic flavors that you can taste, and they are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. But there are more, but there's more than that, is what I'm trying to say. And that is because our sense of smell comes into it in a very strong way. We can't really separate our sense of smell from our sense of flavor. And I tried this earlier, which was that I tasted something and I held my nose to block out the smell. And in fact, I couldn't taste anything. And so I invite you to try that one time. These senses are all mixed up together. And I think I've been reflecting on it more today because of this week and this journaling experience, that in fact, all of our senses come into play when we're experiencing flavor. For example, producers of crisps or chips, we call them chips, potato chips, they make the packet extra super crinkly because the experience of opening that crinkly packet makes you experience the chips as more flavorful and more fresh than can you imagine if the chips came in a floppy fabric packet? It wouldn't be the same experience. And so the experience of the texture and the sound of that crinkly packet influences the flavor. And so it is with these things. Imagine, I can see this beautiful orange color here, and I can see white and cream and green appearing on this cut apple. But imagine if these were both the same brown. It just wouldn't be the same. And so our sense of sight is informing our taste, because we know that this beautiful color, I mean, as I said before, nature gives us color. I was talking about sweetness, so that's a flavor, but nature actually does this amazing thing where fruits will change color as they ripen, because that's more attractive to the predators or to the dispersers of the seeds. And so these senses all interplay with each other, and they inform our sense of flavor, our sense of taste. So let's start with the apple. Seeing as we are talking about what we can see, because that actually informs what we taste, I'm going to start by sketching both of these. And one wonderful thing you can do in your nature journal is make a comparison. Comparison is a really great sort of journaling tool because it helps you sharpen your observations and it helps you see clearly what's there and what's different. So let's start. And I invite you, I've got an apple and an orange, but if you have something different, I invite you to just nature journal what you've got with you. And you can tune me out if you want to focus on your own observations, but I'm just going to rattle on a little bit as I'm drawing. So I'm drawing with a fine liner. I really like to, often I just don't bother with a pencil. I just go ahead and draw straight in my journal with an ink pen because it takes away anxiety about making something perfect because you can't erase it. So you've got to live with what you've got on the page. And what I'm going for is just my impressions. I'm not here to make a perfect drawing. I'm just here to get down some impressions of what I'm seeing. So I can see this half an apple has a little cavity where the seeds are. I can see some green strings or something coming around here in the center. And I can see this little divot at the bottom. So we're doing these prompts, which are really common. And because International Nature Journaling Week is also for people who are new to nature journaling, I'll go over them again because they can be really useful. And the prompts are, I notice. So that's all about what you're seeing. I wonder is another prompt. And it reminds me of, so I notice is all about observations. I wonder is all about questions. And it reminds me of is all about connections. So we are going to use these prompts to help us investigate our flavors. So I cut this apple about half an hour ago and I can see that there's something going on inside it. It's changing color. It's oxidating as the air touches it and it's turning a little bit green. So I'm putting that down. And what else do we need? We need some color for the rest of my apple. Some for the stem. Ooh, look what's happening. It's blooming into what I already did here. I need a little bit of red, I think, for the outside. And once we've got our observations of what we can see, we're going to start tasting. So now I've got something to represent my apple down. I'm going to draw my orange. So comparing apples and oranges here. All right, I'm going to draw my orange here side by side with my apple. Now this is totally different. Look how, and again, talking about how these senses are interplaying with each other, my mouth is doing different things when when I look at this orange. My mouth is like getting ready to taste something juicy. When I look at the apple, my teeth are ready to go because my teeth know from body memory that they're going to be needed to be involved with eating that thing. So the visual sense and the taste are all mixed. I'm going to draw this beautiful orange, which came from my garden. And there's a wiggly, lumpy thing at the bottom here. And it's a nice big round circle. And it has this white pith that I can see on the outside. And it comes down the center with this beautiful white center here. And one tip. And some segments. Okay, that'll do to represent what we see. I'm going to put some color in. It's so interesting that well, if you go to a fine restaurant, a big part of the food experience is what you see, because we get ready to eat, that we get ready to taste by looking at the food. And so you couldn't just plonk something in a big bowl and expect that to pass in a fancy restaurant, because you need to have all the visual stimuli coming in to get that person ready to eat that beautifully delicious thing that's in the restaurant. So that's what we're doing right now. And in fact, I feel my taste buds ready to taste these things. And I love that. I love that maybe more than the other senses, this sense is like a mixture. The flavor, the sense of taste is almost like a mixture. It's an interplay with all the other senses. And I think that's delightful. I'm putting some orange on my orange.
Bethan, while you're just doing that, I want to ask our German viewers, is there a saying the eyes eat too in German? I had a German roommate and she used to say it.
Ah.
If someone knows that phrase and they can put it in the chat or say it, that'd be, I guess people are on mute, but if you can put it in the chat, I loved that when she said that.
Is there a German way to say the eyes eat too? Is that right? Is that the question?
Yeah, and it's kind of like a saying that people say, ah, yes, Verena. Okay, yeah, I totally spelled it wrong. Verena has put it in the chat for us.
Perfect. Thank you for
asking. It's such a great thing.
Yeah. The eyes eat too. I really like that. So I'm putting this little rind on my orange. Do you feel ready to eat? I don't know about you, but I feel like my taste buds are getting all ready. Okay, there we have it. This one looks crazy because it's bleeding, but that's okay. Okay, so now I have some I have some segments of my fruits, and I'm going to taste them, and I'm going to start with apple. So whatever you've got, whatever you're journaling with, I invite you to taste it now, but we're going to do it slowly and we're going to savor it. And we're going to apply these prompts. I wonder it reminds me of. Karina, do you want to just write those down for those who haven't come across these prompts before? We're going to use...
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Perfect. We're going to use that to investigate our flavor experience. So because scent and flavor are completely intermingled, I'm going to smell my apple first. So it smells fresh. And I don't know if you saw the video for the introduction to Flavor Day, but it was myself and my son in the vegetable garden, and he was tasting things, and he tasted some lettuce and he said, it tastes like lettuce. And then he tasted some chocolate and he said, it tastes like chocolate. And I was like, yeah, because we have these really inbuilt sense for what something tastes like, and yet where are the words? How can you say anything except it tastes like chocolate, because you know what that tastes like? So I am going to write down some words about what I am smelling and tasting. I'm going to take a bite. Are you ready? So, it's interesting when you focus on flavor because we're so used to, running and catching a quick meal here and there. Sometimes, often, we forget to taste what something really tastes like. As soon as I bit into that, I just had this flood of sweet taste. So I'm going to write things down in my journal. Sweet is the first thing that comes to my mind. And another thing that we do when we're trying to explain flavor is we might say it's strong or it's mild. That's another sort of gradient that we can use and sort of bring into our vocabulary. It tastes, I'm going to take another bite. I hope you're tasting yours. So descriptive language is something that we can use to help us explain our experience. And so I'm just going to, what I experienced just then is that the sweetness floods my tongue. And so I'm going to write that down on my page, because instead of just writing words, it can be useful to describe. You just use descriptive language. So I invite you to taste and write some descriptive phrases about your taste experience. I feel really weird eating on camera because it's a little bit of a Zoom taboo, I think, to eat. So I feel really awkward about doing that, but that's what it's about. I see some heads nodding. All right, I'm going to write about this taste experience. I invite you to do the same. So when I bite the apple, the sweetness floods my tongue. That was the first experience. I'm going to now taste this. Please forgive me eating on camera. This one's more nuanced. It has, it's a bit sour and it's a bit sweet. So we talked about, I'm going to write these words down actually that help us describe flavors. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Umami is one that I didn't know about for a long time, that sort of came into my awareness some years ago. And it's a Japanese word, I think. Maybe some of our Japanese participants can let us know, but it's the sort of the flavor of broth or stock, that sort of thing, or maybe a fermented things like tempeh and things like that. Correct me if that's completely off, but that's my understanding of umami. So when I tasted this orange, I definitely tasted sweet, something that's sweet and something sour at the same time. So these are the things we're observing. So I notice. Let's try to use the other ones. Let's try to use I wonder. I'm going to go back to my my apple, and I'm going to have another little taste and then see if anything comes up about I wonder. And this is all about questions. So observations and now questions. These 3 prompts are really useful for breaking into a nature journal page and getting us thinking in a certain way. So I'm going to taste this and we're going to ask some questions. So my first thought is, I wonder what the benefit or the evolutionary benefit of being so sweet is for the apple. Why is the apple so sweet? So I'm going to write that down in my journal, and I invite you to do this too. Ask a question about your edible nature journal subject and put that down in your journal. One thing you can do is just do a question mark or a Q if you're journaling this prompt, I wonder.
And Bethan, while you're writing, there's a couple comments in the chat. I'll bring one up right now. Amy asks, I wonder a question here, if more of our senses are involved because our body is also getting us ready for anything that might be dangerous or unpleasant for us to ingest, like many lines of defense.
Yeah,
that was a neat idea.
That's a really great observation, that of all the other things that we do, ingesting something is probably the most dangerous, and the body is taking in cues all the time. Is this safe? Is it too old? Is it edible for a start? Is it ripe? Is it too old? Has it been contaminated by some other source? And so, yes, I would strongly agree that was a factor, that our other senses come in to be able to check all these boxes to say, yes, this is a safe and good thing to eat. And when I was thinking about this, I was also thinking about children, because well, for a start, our first experience of flavor is actually in the womb. When we are in utero, whatever the mother ingests, we get the flavor of that. So if the mother is eating a lot of spicy foods or curries and that sort of thing, those are flavors that the baby will experience. And so it's amazing to me that maybe that's one of the first senses. I guess touch is the first sense, because you're touching your mother as soon as you're out. But flavor is a really big, important first sense, because when a baby's born, all they do is sleep and eat, or drink rather. And so it's all about the mouth, and the touching the mother is the most primary sense, I would say, but flavor is another one. And then when a baby starts to explore the world, everything goes into their mouths. And I remember, when you have to sort of baby-proof your entire house, because whatever they see, they put in their mouth, and you have to be really careful about that. But then there's a period in a child's development where they refuse almost every foods, and I think this is partly an evolutionary mechanism to help them only eat what is safe. And maybe that is tied in with what we were saying before about all of our senses are tuned into, is this edible? Is this safe? Is this ripe enough? Whatever it is. But that's interesting that children look to their parents, of course, to say, is this edible? And a lot of children go through a really fussy eating stage and hopefully come out of it at the end. But that I think is its own evolutionary protective mechanism. So I've completely gone off track, but I think that's a really, really wonderful observation that that flavor is a multi-sensory experience for a good reason. I am wondering about the sweetness of my apple. I'm going to write that down.
Okay, and while you do that, you keep doing your question, but I just want to point out to others that people are putting some interesting "I wonder" in the chat. And if you like, after Beth, then I can read it to you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, go ahead. Do it now. I'm good. I'm multi.
Okay, yeah, okay, I didn't want to sidetrack you there. Okay, so Michaela's wondering if taste indicates nutritiousness to some degree, or rather, why do things that are good for us often not taste that good? Like bitter foods, for example. Yeah, that's really interesting.
That is interesting. Bitter, I think, is really good for digestion. Bitter foods help digestion. Why are they? Well, bitterness and that sort of flavor is to do, I think, with the leaves can become bitter so that predators don't eat them. But there is evolutionary advantage to having like sweetness, because when we were hunter-gatherers, or we were getting food, or there was a lot of food scarcity, you want to eat all the calories you can eat when you find them. And so when you find a bush full of berries, you can if it's attractive to you, you want to eat that sweet stuff and get all the calories while you can. That's my understanding. Sometimes I just make stuff up, but that sounds right, doesn't it?
It sounds good. And then Verena just says, I wonder how strawberries tasted hundreds of years ago before cultivation. Were there more flavors we lost through history? And that's interesting. Strawberries, well, I'm pretty sure they're native to North America, and some people might know the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's an indigenous Potawatomi woman from what's now the US, and she talks about wild strawberries. So that's a neat one too.
That's an amazing book. Everybody should read that book. And I think a lot of flavor variety is being lost. And I think cultivators or people who, decide on these things always tend towards sweet flavors because that's what sells. But yeah, I think having a huge variety of flavors is really important. But it makes me think about when I was young, we used to have watermelons with pips everywhere, and now they've bred them so that you don't have seeds in your watermelon, which was a huge part of the eating experience, was having a mouthful of watermelon seeds and spraying them at your brother and sister. Which is a shame. And there's other foods that we used to have that no longer have seeds, like grapes. Most grapes are seedless now. So I think that those things do develop and change over time. And I think you're right that a lot of the flavor profile of different foods is being lost for sure. I'm going to taste my other morsel and see if I can have a question about this. I invite you to do the same thing. I feel like I'm breaking social taboo every time I do this. So I'm wondering about the compounds in this orange and what makes it, what's making the sweet and what's making the salty? I mean, sorry, the sour. How is the fruit making these two seemingly opposing tastes at the same time, and what compounds are creating those? So I'm going to try and make that into a question.
And just a quick time check, it's 10 to the hour, just so you know.
Thank you. We're just going to do the other prompt and then we will have some questions or some discussion. I've forgotten how to spell flavor. Okay, what compounds in the fruit are making sweet and sour flavors? Do you misspell in your journal? I do it all the time. Okay, so now I've eaten all my orange. I've eaten most of my apple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the final prompts from memory. So we've done I notice. We've done I wonder. We're going to do it reminds me of. And with flavor, this is a really, really wonderful thing to bring in, because flavors, as I said before, are really tied up with culture and our family heritage and things we grew up with, things that we have memory of from years past. And so I invite you to taste your edible subject and see if let it flood you with a memory. See if there's a memory and something that something that it reminds you of, and put that down in your journal. I do have a little teeny piece of apple here. I'm going to eat that. You know what? It reminds me of my school lunch, because I always had a red apple in my lunch when I was going to primary school. So I'm going to write that down in my journal. I would love to hear memories if anyone's putting them in the chat.
So far, people have been putting memories of spitting cherry stones.
Yes.
And putting, you know, when you take an orange peel slice in your lips and be like a monkey. Those are the memories people have shared so far.
I love that.
Yeah.
So the flavor reminds me of taking a red apple to school in my lunchbox. And the orange, it reminds me of making orange juice with my mum. Sometimes we used to juice oranges, and you get a whole stack of oranges all in a line, and you cut them all and then you make a big batch of juice. That's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of making orange juice with family. I used to do the same. Actually, sometimes I would stay with my grandma alone, and my grandma would make orange juice for my grandfather. And that experience of making orange juice with family really comes back whenever I taste oranges. So I'm going to write that down.
It's really interesting, Bethany, because people are sharing memories in the chat, or things that flavors remind them of different foods too, coffee, strawberries, and they are also linked to childhood and family and memories. And that happened in the aroma workshop too. That's really nice.
Yeah, and maybe also because those two, like we said, those two senses are so interconnected that there's something about memory involved with both of them. That's really, really lovely. As a mammally, it reminds me of making orange juice as a mammally. Sometimes sometimes I forget how to write family. All right. So there we have it. We have tasted something together. We have used the prompts I notice, I wonder, and it reminds me of. And we know about these flavors a little more. I find this week that it has been really challenging to find words. Well, it's one thing. I'm going to stop my share and we can have a little chat. So one thing that I have noticed this week is that I don't have the vocabulary that I want to for other senses. So I feel that we are, if you have this sense available to you, that we are sort of vision dominated and dominant, and that we have vocabulary for describing things that we see in ways that we don't have the vocabulary for other senses. And I've found myself a little frustrated this week because I've been, especially we did with the aroma and with the flavor, it's like I feel really limited in my vocabulary. And one way we can get around that is to liken it to something else. So you can use simile and metaphor, which is a really wonderful sort of poetic way to describe flavor or to get around not having the vocabulary. But I'm really interested to know about other people's experience of journaling these other senses that are a little less dominant for us, senses we don't pay attention to as much. So if there are any questions, do let me know. You can write them in the chat and Karina can ask me, or if you feel okay about being on camera, you can use the raised hand feature at the bottom and just let us know. Tell us something. Tell us something about your experience.
So there are some great things that have been shared in the chat. Someone mentioned earlier that they use the sense of touch to tell if something's ripe, like peaches are, I want to do with the plump peaches and that kind of thing. So soft fruits. And I thought that was a really interesting point. And Dane's making a really good point here about how important taste and flavor is, and just the importance of doing exactly what we're doing today, challenging ourselves to include it in our nature journal. And there's lots of different ways to do that. And then Valerie asked if there's flavors that are more satisfying to the brain, if our brains cue into some, and you already talked about sweetness, but the others play a role too. And I'm just scanning for more.
That is really interesting. I'll just take up that invitation to speak on that for a moment, which is that one of the things that we did on the video today, my son and I, was to talk about chocolate. We were tasting chocolate. And I don't know what it is about chocolate, but to me, it is so deeply satisfying that I always want it. If I'm celebrating, if I'm sad, if I'm tired, whatever the occasion is, I want to eat chocolate, because to me, that taste is so warming and satisfying is a great word. I don't have the answer as to why that is, but for me, that is a brain reactive flavor. Are there any other comments coming through, Karina? Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Yeah, Verena, tell us something.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering all the time, because I enjoyed it so much. And I'm doing the I wonder and notice and stuff all the time, but I always leave out the sense of smell and taste, or not very prominently. But why don't we have words for such one of the 5 senses? And I'm really wondering why this is. I guess our sense of sight is the main focus, yes, but it's nourishing. It's really dangerous sometimes if we eat something wrong. Why don't we talk about taste and smell more often? It's just like I never noticed this, and I'm curious about finding more words, like in my repertoire of talking about stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? And it's one of those times where you don't know what you don't know until you start to focus on it. And this week has really brought that to the front, like, oh yeah, we don't have the words to talk about these things, and why not? And how can we find them? Yes, you're right. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Farina. Amy,
I'll just, this is, oh, Amy has a question. I'll let Amy go first.
yeah. Hi, Amy. We need to hear you, darling.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking for it. I have a few things just on what Verena said. I wonder if it's because, I wonder if we don't have a lot of language for taste or taste, because maybe it's just so subjective. Like, as far as when we're talking about food with each other, so often it can be simplified to I like it or I don't like it. And maybe we can't explain why. And maybe it's because it's such that mesh of other senses, like, and this kind of leads into my next story of I just don't like tomatoes. And I actually think it's the texture more than the taste. But interesting story, my mum and my mother-in-law happened to come over just an hour ago. And my mum brought these. I don't know if you know, they're persimmons. And my mum is Cambodian and my mother-in-law spent many years living in Nepal. And so my mum said, have you ever tried one of these? To my mother-in-law. And she said, yes, we used to eat them in Nepal. She said, oh, here, have one. And this one is really, really firm. Like, it's slightly squishier than an apple, but like I'm pushing really hard. You can see the whites on my fingers. I'm pushing really hard and it's not budging. And Sue, my mother-in-law, said, oh, are these ready to eat? Because we usually wait for them to be really soft. And my mum said, no, you have to eat it now. And so the different countries were used to eating them at different stage, like they're different varieties. But my mum said, no, these are like apple. You kind of eat them when they're crisp and they're really sweet. And Sue has said, oh, we always waited for them to be really gooey and soft. And she said, lucky I asked, because I wouldn't have eaten them if I didn't know you could eat them when they were hard. And then the question, this is coming back to the other part of the tomato, then the question turned around to, Amy, do you want some? And I said, I don't know if I don't really like them. And finally my mum said, have you actually eaten one? And I said, no. Because look how much it looks like a tomato.
Yes.
I mean, I know the tops are different, but the color is just the same.
100.
And my mum does this thing where she chops it this way, and it looks just like a tomato on the inside. So for tonight, I was brave and I ate some.
Did you like it?
And because I had no idea what to expect, it just felt weird.
Yeah.
So I had one piece and it tasted weird. And the second time, I actually couldn't taste it.
You couldn't taste it? There was no flavor?
No.
Wow.
The second piece I just had now. And I think it's because maybe I'm reading into things because we're talking about this, but maybe like mentally my brain doesn't know what to do because it doesn't taste like a tomato. It doesn't feel like a tomato.
Yeah.
And so now it just doesn't know how to describe it. And so it's just kind of shut itself down.
Blanking, computers blanking. That's amazing.
Yeah. Overload.
It's a fabulous, fabulous story. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is really interesting that the brain registered it as a tomato, and so you were anticipating tomato flavors and your body said, no, I don't like that flavor, even though you didn't know what it was. So it shows really how the other senses are involved and how the brain anticipates food, because that's what we were doing before. When we were drawing the food, the body was preparing for the flavors. Your body was preparing for tomato flavor, which it doesn't like. And then when it received this unknown flavor that it couldn't categorize, it didn't know what to taste. That is so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Wow.
And Beth, and I think Dane had a comment as well.
Yeah. Dani, hi.
Oh, sorry, I mispronounced your name, and now I have to unmute.
Just to comment that food is going to be one of our saviors. How we grow it and what attention we give to it. So if we can explore these senses more with the taste and the flavors of the food, I think it's a really awesome thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that growing our own food, thinking about and working towards food security and distribution is really important, and the way that we choose and grow and the things we purchase in terms of food are really important in terms of making an impact on this beautiful planet. And yeah, thank you, Dani. That's important. And involved in that is tastes, because we want to be nourishing ourselves with a whole range of different wonderful flavors, and we want to be buying and growing fresh, healthful foods. Yeah, that's a really important point. Thank you. It has been so fun to do this. I was actually kind of nervous because I didn't know how to do it, and it's been really fun, challenging, because yeah, how do we put down a sense that we don't explore very often? But it's been fun to tackle that with you, and I really appreciate you all being here and taking this moment to nature journal flavors with me. Yeah, are there any last minute comments or questions that we have as a group? Maybe it's time to say good night or good afternoon. I really appreciate you all being part of International Nature Journaling Week. This is it's been an incredible week so far, and it's coming towards the end, but it's been so fun and so enriching and joyful to explore these, not only explore these senses for myself, and I hope for you as well, but to see all the different ways that people are nature journaling and exploring the ideas and the senses in their own way, in their own place, because that's another thing that this week does. It brings together people's places and share them across the world. So it's been so fun to see all the different senses being explored in different countries. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you so much. Take good care, everyone.